Welcome back to Align Yourself podcast. I'm Ebony Rose, and today's conversation is going to shift the way you think about something you use every single day, your shoes. We're diving into the world of barefoot shoes and how they impact not just our feet, but our posture, movement, and our children's feet development. I'm joined by Erin, the founder of Barefoot Shoes Australia. Her journey into barefoot living is such an inspiring one. What began as a personal shift has grown into a mission to help others reconnect with the natural way our bodies were designed to move. Erin's here to share her story, explain what's really happening to our feet when we wear traditional shoes, and give us simple, practical tools to make healthier choices for ourselves and our kids. This episode is such an eye-opener. I can't wait for you to hear it, so let's just get into it. Erin, hello and welcome to Align Yourself podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, and thanks for having me.
Erin, can you start by sharing your journey with us? What led you to barefoot shoes?
Yeah, it was probably similar to a lot of people who have discovered them in that it was just that I was having functional foot issues of my own. So I had gotten into running and was starting to have knee problems. And I'd had sore knees on and off since my early 20s. I'd seen a doctor about it, had really been brushed off and just told not to do those exercises or movements that were hurting them. And then fast forward into my 30s, I'd started running and I couldn't run more than sort of 10Ks without getting pretty severe knee pain. It got to the point where it was keeping me awake at night. And I went to specialists, paid a lot of money for doctors to tell me that you just need to run less and it will hurt less. And I didn't really accept that as an option. So I started doing my own research and I tried all different types of shoes. I went thicker with shoes and more support. And then I was in a shoe store one day, and because we lived in the country, didn't have a lot of access to all different types of shoes. And I'd gone to the city and I thought, I'm just going to try on every single pair while I'm here, and picked up a pair of Ultras, which have a really wide foot shape and are completely flat. And as soon as I put them on, it was the first time it felt like my foot was making the decisions and not the shoe. And it just felt super comfortable. And it was after then that I started to research a little bit about wider shoes, barefoot shoes, and really went down the rabbit hole. And all of a sudden, it just kind of made sense that shoes should be shaped like feet. And it just aligned with sort of the more natural movement way of thinking. And that sort of made sense to me. I went more and more minimal with my shoes. And in the research found I needed to do a bit of work on my feet. And once I discovered the concept of barefoot shoes, I thought, this isn't for running. This is for standing and for walking. I thought, I can't change the way I run. I stand out of alignment and I walk out of alignment. So I need to change those things. Like, these shoes make sense, but they need to be what I'm wearing all the time, not just my running shoes. And so there wasn't much available in Australia in terms of everyday shoes. That was probably, must have been 4.5 years ago now. And so then I decided that I would start importing them from Europe because they were gaining popularity over there and there seemed to be a lot more available. So I started importing them from Europe, and that's how the store came about from there.
Wow, incredible. So for somebody who's listening who's never seen a pair of barefoot shoes before, can you paint us a picture of what they look like?
Yeah, sure. So oftentimes, if people have heard of barefoot shoes, they might think of the separated toe version that look pretty strange to most of us. And they are barefoot shoes, but not all barefoot shoes look like that. So in order to be a barefoot shoe, it needs sort of 5 main characteristics. One, and probably the most recognizable one of a barefoot shoe, is to have a wide toe box. So to allow your toes to splay, and in particular for your big toe joint to be able to be in a straight position and not pushed inward towards the other toes. The second is that it's fixed to your feet. Flip-flop or a thong doesn't really work because your toes need to grip to be able to move in them. So it's got to be attached to your foot. Then it's also got to be flexible to some degree. So your feet are made with 26 bones over 20 muscles and more than 100 ligaments, and they're made to move. So the idea is that the shoes will allow your feet to move. So they're flexible to varying degrees, and they are designed so that you can feel the ground, again, to varying degrees, because we're all at different stages and need different things, and they're for different purposes in life, but they will have a thinner than usual sole, and they'll be flat from heel to toe. So no heel rise at all. We know that a heel, like a high heel, is not good for us and our alignment, but even just a sneaker will have usually a quite considerable, a couple of centimetres of heel rise between the heel and the toe, which then throws out our alignment, and the rest of the body up the chain has to compensate. And yeah, those are pretty much the main ones.
Before we continue with the next question for you, Erin, we're just going to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Jacinta Cornell Skin. Jacinta is a holistic skin therapist and a qualified corneotherapist, helping you get to the root cause of your skin concerns. Jacinta offers personalized in-clinic and online consultations using high-quality, natural and fragrance-free skincare, including the renowned Dermavigils range, which I've been using for a few years now, and honestly, I can't recommend enough. And just for our listeners, you can enjoy 10% off your consultation, plus she ships Australia-wide, so you can access professional skin support from the comfort of your home. To book or browse her range, head to Jacinta Cornell Skin. Now, let's get back into today's episode with Erin, owner and founder of Barefoot Shoes Australia. So, Erin, how are they different from the traditional shoes most of us grew up wearing and most of us are putting on our children's feet?
Yeah, I guess so. Those 5 things that I described to look out for in a barefoot shoe are what makes them different. So generally, shoes will have a narrow toe box. So the toe box is the way we describe the front part of the shoe where the toes go. Generally, it's tapered and it comes to a point in the middle. And our feet are supposed to be widest at the toes. So that narrow toe box is actually squishing our toes inward. Regular shoes will also have that heel rise, and they're quite often really stiff and chunky. So your feet aren't able to move. Your foot isn't able to go through the natural gait cycle that it was designed, that it has all those parts to move and function and help us walk and run and move efficiently. And popping it in those stiff, chunky shoes prevents it from being able to do those things.
So I'm trying to make sure the person that's listening with me today, because we just received our first pair of barefoot shoes that we got from you and your website. And prior to getting them, my daughter was wearing Vans. And when I started to learn about barefoot shoes, you can't unsee it, right? It's like whenever you're learning anything new, you can't unsee what you learn. And what I was noticing is that when her foot was walking, it was like kind of like clunking down. When you walk barefoot, your foot kind of goes like, when I picture someone doing the worm on the dance floor, and it's like, it kind of goes like that, but the opposite way. When I was watching her walk, and when I walk in my Pumas, I can feel myself, your foot is just clunking along like as you're walking. So when I noticed when I got barefoot shoes is her foot actually does the worm, the best way of describing it. And I've also noticed since learning about barefoot shoes is our toes are so pushed together that actually when you look down at your feet, your toes are actually all clunked. And I have a friend who's really down this path already, and her daughter has her feet are beautifully, like toes are beautifully spread out, and you can actually see a difference in feet that haven't been manipulated from a young age to feet like I think about my grandma's feet, like she was known to wear high heels for years on end, like even at home. And she has, what are they called? The big
A bunion?
bunions, huge bunions. And bunions were like
So
a
common.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's from what? High heel shoes, pushing your feet down. And then when you look at her feet when they're barefoot, all her toes are just pointed as a triangle together. And now when you look at like so many shoes, they're pushing kids' little toes together. And so what is the long-term effects of children wearing shoes that are pushing their toes together?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in there, but it's exactly like you say. So if you're going to have a rise in the heel and then you get an unnatural load on that ball of your foot, and then you combine that with the toes being squished in, one of the most common things you'll see is a bunion. And, it's super widespread, and it's really obvious. And like you said, you can't unsee it when you think about the shape of our shoes and the shape that our feet end up, that it's really obvious once you realize. But, you can't blame anyone for not knowing, because shoes are just shaped like that. We've always seen shoes like that. That's what we used to. And in fact, when people see barefoot shoes, they think they look really strange, and they're super wide and they're clown shoes and that sort of thing. But yeah, once you put it together with the shape of a foot, it makes sense. So it is often not until the long-term effects, the visual effects start to come in, or the functional effects, that we really start to question it. Like you say, it might be something like a bunion. If not bunions, then there's other things, like it could be a callus in a spot where the load is putting pressure on the foot, or people will come with neuromas, which is a really painful nerve issue, and general deformities, like you say, like your grandma, their toes will be all crowded and sort of overlapping because they've been in that position for a long time. And particularly if you start with kids, their feet, we know they're not developed fully yet. We put them into squished up shoes, then that's how their feet are going to develop. And the other thing you mentioned about the worm motion of the foot, I like the way you've described it, and the clunking, because it really is more pronounced in kids. Like, it's really easy to see when you see a young child trying to walk. It's quite pronounced that if the shoe is really stiff, that they sort of clunk along, and you can see that what is compensating is the other joints further up the body. So the foot is designed, the arch and the muscles and all those different bones are designed to pronate. So the arch is supposed to collapse and flatten and then lift, and that's the spring motion that is supposed to propel us forward. Now, if you've got stiff arch support holding the arch up all the time and a stiff sole that doesn't bend, it can't do that motion. It can't push in and spring off the ground. So that's where you get that kind of clunking, non-foot bending motion as they walk.
Wow. So if you had it your way, would you advise all mums and all of us to just throw out all of our shoes?
It's a tricky one. So when it comes to kids, that's definitely an easy place to start, because their feet are less affected. They haven't spent years and years in shoes, and they haven't got corrections to make. So most kids can pop on a pair of barefoot shoes and function really well. Better to have them off altogether. And they often spend lots of time barefoot, so their feet are still functioning really well. So kids generally, it's not hard to just get them straight into barefoot shoes, and 100%. I would love to see them as minimal as possible, and that's not always the case. Even barefoot shoes, some have a stiffer, thicker sole than others, and there's fashions and different things that affect what they wear. But ultimately, the more minimal of a shoe and the more time the kids can spend barefoot, the better. When it comes to adults, it's a little bit trickier because, like we say, we've had years in these shoes and our feet have all got a different story. We're all at a different starting place. And if you go from, I heard an analogy once that I really liked. If you had your arm in a cast for 10 years and then you took off the cast and you tried to do push-ups, you'd run into a lot of problems. And that's what it's like for some people putting on a pair of barefoot shoes and starting for the first time, and then they might get injured and then think it's the problem of the shoe, and it's not the case. It's that there's work to do. So I would definitely recommend people sort of need to assess where they're at, and if you do have pain and major foot problems, seeing a barefoot aligned professional, a podiatrist or a physio that is supportive of that. And there's lots out there now, but you still have to search for somebody that aligns with what you're looking for. But yeah, I would say for adults, definitely start with your everyday shoes. So I went all in on running. For me, I'm just the kind of person who goes all in. So I didn't really do a slow transition, but not just because of that, also because the knee pain was so bad that the barefoot shoes stopped that. So any sort of small niggles and things that came up for me when I was running in barefoot shoes were worth it to have got rid of the knee pain. But what I would normally recommend is that you just start with your everyday shoes, your work shoes, things where your body's not taking so much load, and then move on to athletic shoes and running shoes and that sort of thing down the track.
Right. So you're saying that if you've got chronic knee pain, and I'm thinking also ankle and hips, I'm assuming as well, You're saying you need to be looking at your shoes and going more barefoot.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's all joined. So it's a big picture that the feet are our foundations. It's where it all starts. It's a really good place to look. But what you want to find is a professional who's going to look at the body as a whole. Because I found a lot of our sort of Western medicine now, it compartmentalizes everything, and a person will look at the foot. And in fact, a podiatrist, I believe, is only allowed to treat from, I think, the knee down, which in my mind is insane because it's all joint. Everything affects everything that's going on further up. So yes, definitely start with looking at your feet, and the more time you can spend barefoot, the more time you can get on different surfaces and starting to adjust your feet. But I think if someone's looking to switch, the two easiest things is to have a wide toe box. So everybody can do that. Doesn't matter where you're at, you can have a wide toe box. And you can also have a shoe that's fixed to your foot. From there, slowly adjusting to a flat, no heel rise, and to a thinner, more flexible sole. That depends on where you're at and sometimes takes some transition time.
If the person listening to this has been recommended to wear orthotics and wants to transition to barefoot shoes, where would you say to start?
Yeah, so that's where I'd definitely go with the everyday shoes.
Okay.
And something that you can introduce slowly. So you might get a barefoot pair of shoes that you can wear sort of casually or to work, and you might wear them a couple of days and then go back to your old shoes a couple of days, because it is a good idea to transition, see how your feet are feeling and take it slowly, because those muscles in your feet, if you haven't used them for a long time, it's going to be a real workout. And you need to get them used to it.
And so, what's a simple test that the person here that's with us today can do on a shoe to know if it's healthy for their cells and their child's feet?
Yeah, I think when you're in the shops, you can really narrow it down to 3 simple things. It's the wide toe box, the flexible test, and for kids in particular, no heel. That heel rise is a big one for kids because their shoes are shorter. It has a more pronounced impact. The angle is greater and really affects them. So yeah, when you're in a shop, you can check your shoes and give it a flexible test. And is it shaped like a foot? It seems like an easy one to do.
And I just want to narrow in on that. So basically, when you look down at your feet, I'm kind of thinking of that the Pumas and the Converses, where you look down at your feet and it comes up into like this, like a almond rounded shape, and it goes inwards. So that's a no-no, where you want it to come kind of like from the middle part. It goes out and it stays as a box. So it stays outwards and then comes around on the toes. So your toes don't at all get squished together when they're inside the shoe. And then the flexibility test, you're saying that when you pick up the shoe, you should be able to bend it in half. Otherwise, the denser, if you're unable to do that, that is going to put damage on the child's feet and our own feet, because when we're walking, it's like the clunky platform. It's not moving with the shoe. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's right. Yeah, definitely. That shape one that you mentioned, I guess the big thing to look out for is the first metatarsal. So your big toe should be able to run in a straight line. It shouldn't have to point inwards at all. And then from there, in the barefoot shoe world, there's all different shaped shoes because we all have different shaped feet as well. So even once you have a wide toe box, some people have narrower feet, some people have toes that are longer, and some have them more sloped. So it's a good idea to look for a shoe that works for your particular foot shape, but that key is to have that first toe to be in a straight line. And there was something I discovered, and you can do a really simple test yourself and notice how it works with the function of your feet. I discovered it just standing in the shower and looking down one day after I'd been and paid $400 for a specialist to tell me to stop running so much. And I saw that when my big toe pointed inwards, my whole arch collapsed and my foot became flat and looked like I had a flat foot. And when I do that and I go to bend my knee points inwards, which is putting pressure on my knee and causing knee pain. And then as soon as I lift my big toe and straighten it, just straightening my big toe lifts my arch. So all of a sudden I don't have a flat foot anymore by just straightening that big toe. And that's even a good little exercise to do, right? If your big toe is pointed inwards a little from wearing shoes, if you just practice straightening it, and then that's working the muscles of that arch and starting to develop the function of the arch there. And then when you straighten that big toe and bend your knee, it tracked forwards. And that was like a massive aha moment for me. I was like, oh my gosh, when my big toe is straight and I bend my knee, it goes in the right direction.
Wow, I'm doing the test now and I can definitely see it. And I've, since coming to more the wellness space, like the holistic wellness space, I have met people that do these toe exercises and they actually trying to re-spread their toes apart, and they wear this kind of looks like, when you go to the nail shop and you get that little thing that goes in between all your toenails so you can paint your toenails. It's
Yeah.
kind of like that. And then a toe separator. And then they use that to separate their toes. But what's coming up for me is that I've not heard of this and feet stuff until I've come into this world, right? Like I think most of us like start off life in the conventional path with doctors and foot doctors. What are foot doctors called?
Podiatrists.
Podiatrist. Is there podiatrists that actually are talking about? Because I remember going to most shoe shops now, and I'm thinking most of them are recommending quite the arch is huge. Like the last pair of running shoes I just invested in, which is a very well-known brand, and it's a huge arch in both in the middle and the heel, where now that I really come to think of it, when I'm trying to do, I remember trying to like squat. I can't squat. Like I think it's like the muscles in the back of my leg. Like I was trying to really build up my squat. And what I noticed is when I was going CrossFit, they started to tell me to take my shoes off because I was able to get there. But if I was wearing the shoes, because they had a big heel and the arch, I wasn't able to get to the depth, and so I would go barefoot. I'd take my shoes off for that exercise. So I'm just like confused, because the reason I got you on today, Erin, is because back in episode, I'm going to say 4, 5 or 6, I interviewed a chiropractor who talks out a lot about barefoot shoes, and she speaks about ensuring that the body's in alignment and about what you do outside the clinic between chiropractic sessions is the most important thing. So she's like, barefoot shoes are number one, or being barefoot. So why is this not so well known in the conventional route? Like, why is it the only holistic wellness space that we're talking about supporting the body's natural foot shape and not the other space?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I wish it was more out there, and I wish someone had told me about it earlier, because while it makes perfect sense to me now, until you see it or until someone tells you, you're right, it's not out there. It's not in the mainstream. And like I say, to find a podiatrist or a physio or chiropractor who's supportive of it, you have to be careful because there's a lot out there. And there's a couple of reasons, I suspect, why. And I have heard from podiatrists things like them being told that in order to make money as a podiatrist, you have to sell orthotics. So their income is reliant on the very things that, that they would be speaking against. So it doesn't kind of align with what they're doing. I hate to think that's a major part of it, but I suspect it probably is. And then the other thing is they can only go by what they learn, right? So if the information that they've studied is outdated and that's what they're learning as to be true, then and a lot of them, they genuinely believe that that's what's best. And it's only new, and as we know, it always takes a bit of time for alternative ideas to be accepted by the mainstream, and I think it's coming through now. And I know of lots of podiatrists and physios that are the same as the chiro you've spoken about, who are really supportive of barefoot shoes. Most of even them will say it depends on a person's situation. So it's not for everybody. There are people that can't just wear barefoot shoes, and I totally get that. And there are people that just won't want to, and I get that too. But we should have the option, right? It should be there. It should be known as something that can affect your movement and your body, and so that we know it's an option. But yeah, it's a matter about finding the right people, I think, when it comes to the professional world. And hopefully, I think as time goes by, there'll be more and more.
So if the person listening with us right now is a mother and their child has flat feet and they have been recommended orthotics, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say maybe find a professional who is barefoot aligned. So I personally am not a professional. I go from my own experience, and I have kids, absolutely. And I've done a lot of research, and I know that a flat foot is not necessarily a problem. So it's about how the foot functions. And kids start with a flat foot. That's how they generally move when they're little. So it's not something to be concerned about when they're little. And as they get older, it strengthens, and the more time they spend barefoot or able to move their feet, those muscles obviously develop and things. If they've been recommended orthotics already, orthotics are like, if you think about it, if you've got a flat foot and you're trying to put an orthotic in there to lift the arch, it's a Band-Aid. It
Is it?
might be helping with some pain in the short term, but it's not going to correct whatever's going on underneath, and it's not going to be a long-term solution. It's going to be something that you have to continually buy and continually use. And like any other part of the body, the muscles in the foot, if you don't use them, you lose them. So they'll just get weaker over time. So potentially they get worse. And yeah, so if you have orthotics, I guess the best thing to do is to find a roadmap out. So they might be something you need now, but you want to be talking to somebody who's looking long-term and looking holistically of a way to get you out of them, not that you're going to just be stuck in them forever, because our bodies are adaptable and strong, and they can do amazing things.
You touched on something that we value so much here, and that's not band-aid solutions. It's addressing the root cause to all of our problems and to be able to support the body to heal itself, because essentially our bodies are incredible and they have the ability to heal themselves when supported correctly. So I love the fact that you touched on that. And if anyone's listening and they're finding that the person they're receiving health advice from them, something feels off, something doesn't feel right, not only for our children, but for ourselves, to go and get different alternatives. And there's so many incredible Facebook community groups, especially in the conscious space, that you can reach out on and say, look, my child's got this, or I've got this. Has anyone done anything different? That isn't just putting a band-aid on the solution. It's actually coming to the root cause. And like you said, to help support our children from a young age to develop into and help assist their body to develop correctly. And shoes is such a big one. I just can't unsee it. Ever since I've been going down the barefoot route, which is only very recently, every time I slip my feet into those shoes in my wardrobe, they look cool. They're the big brand. And one thing I promised myself as a mum is that I didn't want to raise my kids to know the big brands and the big celebrities. I wanted them to know nature, to know more plant names, to know how to cook the basics of food. And that's probably the reason why I started this podcast, is because I want to share that journey with everybody, kind of desystemizing ourselves and actually going back to core values and our favorite things about nature, and discovering that, like, I didn't know any native plants names, and I didn't know how to make my own bone broth from scratch or how to bake my own bread. So these are the things, going back to actually the most important things in life, and that is unlearning big brands names. So even though while I had the big brands in my wardrobe, every time I put my feet into them at the moment, I'm realizing, like, oh, this doesn't feel aligned anymore. So I am super excited to get into barefoot shoes, because I've just purchased my first pair for my daughter from your website. And I feel so much better knowing that I'm actually supporting my children's feet and their development with these shoes. So for anyone listening who's curious about barefoot shoes, where's the place to find you?
We should be pretty easy to find online. Our website is barefootshoesaustralia.com.au. We have a massive range, so we pride ourselves on having the widest range. If there's a shoe from one of those big brands that you absolutely love, or you have a shoe that suits a purpose that you really need, I really feel like we can swap it out with a barefoot shoe now. That's really only happened in the last sort of 2 to 3 years. So it's a really exciting time to have discovered barefoot shoes. So yeah, barefootshoesaustralia.com.au, or we have an Instagram page as well, and you can check out what's happening on there.
Beautiful, Erin. Is there anything else you want to cover?
Nothing. I think that really is the basics that people need to know. I really love what you said. I think if there's anything we all need, it's stripping things back and getting back to nature, and really, yeah, getting things more simple again.
Absolutely. So, thank you so much for tuning into this conversation and making it through to the end with Erin from Barefoot Shoes Australia. I hope it's opened your eyes to how much impact something as simple as the shoes we wear can have on our health, movement, and even our kids' development. If today's episode has inspired you to try barefoot shoes for yourself or your little ones, Erin has kindly given all Align Yourself listeners a discount. You can use the code EBONY10 at the checkout for 10% off at www.barefootshoesaustralia.com.au. And as always, thank you for being here with me on Align Yourself podcast. If you loved this episode, share it with a friend, leave a review, and tag us on socials. It helps this message reach more like-minded people just like you. Have the most amazing day.